study on women in the Bible, and mostly Old Testament, and I was using the Jewish women, the midrash that was online. That's so fantastic.
Oh, the Jewish Women's Archive?
Yes.
It's so
So
good.
it's the Jewish. I had some other. Um, I have a lot of feminist theology books, and many of them written by Asian. So
I assume you know Alicia Ostraker's work.
Oh yes.
She's incredible. She was the keynote speaker at our first
Oh
conference,
yes.
and I love her.
But it's like a wealth of so much compared to, frankly, some of the more popular Protestant religions. Anyway, so
It's very permission.
yeah, and
Like that feminist
yeah.
take on.
Before I taught it here, I taught theater at Biola.
Oh, okay.
At that time, university sales,
Yeah.
I don't know if they're still that strict. I had to have my husband come with me for him to tell him that I was okay.
Wow.
So
That's a lot.
It was a temper, yeah. So I said,
Well, Katie was with me. She took a workshop that I gave at the Festival of University. And it was kind of a version of the workshop I taught here, which is like kind of writing in rough. And it was almost all pastors, and I had people who were like and they were so resistant. And they did, because they were just like, I don't understand. And they weren't being mean. They were just like, they actually were scared because I was asking them to do something that's right.
yeah.
But when they because it was like, oh, they were experiencing the text and it was beautiful. But you could feel that resistance probably from being in those rooms, right? So, yeah.
At our church, but
Yeah.
because it was a lot more open.
Oh, good. That's awesome.
Good, how are you? Whoa, Jesus.
I should hide like I'm in a cave and just go sit down. I'm here. And I got to burst out. But I feel like the rest of my life is going to be chasing the high of confidence while everybody sings the loud last note. And I'm just like,
Hello, lovely people. Welcome to the evening reading of the 27th Annual Poetry Day. Thank you for being here. Sure, you can woo for that. I love Poetry Day. Before we get started, I want to thank a few people and entities. So since she's sitting right here in front of me, I'm first going to thank Dr. Carol Blessing, who began this event 27 years ago, and I'm so grateful. It's been wonderful. So, and thank you to the Department of Literature, Journalism, Writing, and Languages for supporting it for all of this time. And sure, we can clap for everything. I love it. Good enthusiasm. Also, thank you to the Masters in Writing program and the Writers Symposium by the Sea for co-sponsoring and promoting the event. And a huge thank you to La Playa Books, and Amy is out there. Buy a book if you haven't, and also just go down the hill and hang out at La Playa Books, because they're amazing. Did I forget anyone or anything? Probably, but Mia! No, Mia is the grand finale of the thing, so... Thank you to Mia, of course, and again, for all of her amazing work and all of the logistics. We would maybe try to do this still, but it would be much harder if we didn't have Mia. So thank you. I get to introduce the lovely grad student who is going to introduce Jessica. So Natalie Borum is a Master's in Writing student in her first year here. She's focusing on poetry. And she is our magnificent managing editor of Last Syllable, a long-form literary journal. She has a bachelor's in English with a creative writing minor from Pepperdine University, and she's doing incredible things with her poetry, with Code Switching and the Borderlands, and I'm so honored that I get to read it. So please welcome Natalie.
Hi, everyone. This evening, we are so lucky to be joined by a writer whose poetry enters and enriches conversations of identity, faith, love, and so much more. Through her evocative imagery and vulnerable storytelling, Jacob's work in Unalone invites readers to first meditate on existing narratives and challenges them to join her in a contemporary reimagining. She is a poet, unafraid to ask readers to consider what it means to be human, and unafraid to find beauty in fragility. Jacobs has been the finalist and recipient of several literary awards and has most recently been honored as a 2025 Guggenheim Fellow. But after today, she can finally add visiting writer at Point Loma to her list of accomplishments. Please join me in welcoming Jessica Jacobs.
I've been waiting for this day. Thank you. Katie, thank you so much for this lovely invitation, and Bettina and Holland and Mia and Robbie, and Carol, thank you for starting this series. There was a series where I went to college, and it really changed my life, the people I got to see. So it's a real honor whenever I get to visit a school. So thank you. So I was saying earlier, can you all hear me? Sounds is good. All right. We got this exciting podium, so I feel like I have to center myself. So I was saying earlier this afternoon, I did kind of like a little bit of literary speed dating with students like Natalie, which was great. It was, you all were talking so much about identity and like trying to figure out like how to say the things that scare you and talk about who you are. And you made me just throw away all the poems that I was thinking about reading, and I'm reading different poems. So I hope that's okay. Thanks for the inspiration. Yeah. So Unalone is entirely a book of poems in conversation with the book of Genesis. And for me, I was raised in a secular Jewish house in Central Florida, and we were culturally Jewish, but there was almost no religion in the home. So I didn't ever read a Bible until I was in my 30s. And it felt like I was kind of like an imposter going into somebody else's territory. And it was very hard for me to find within myself the permission to claim my lineage and tradition, but especially to be in conversation with these texts. Oh, and lots of people have books, so I can call it out like a hymnal. Page 11. You can read along. So I'm going to start with a poem from my childhood. Imposter Syndrome Among the Thorns and Thistles. How old were you when the world tipped its hand? when things you thought were natural showed their seams. I was 13, on trucked-in pallets across the street, squares of scotch grass stacked high as my head. Did you know a lawn could be delivered? I didn't, but lured by promises of doing the same work as the boys, I hauled and placed, puzzling them neat as a sheet of graph paper. The girls that year had begun to paint their faces, a line of cheap orange stark along their jaws. Unlike me, they had not yet learned the art of how to blend. All those boys I pretended to like, all the girls I pretended not to. In thrift stores, we tried on others' past season selves, the clothes like the kids in the hallways, grouped by color and type. We wore masks of slang and song lyrics, dropped band names like currency, smoked skunkweed copped from an older brother's underwear drawer. Mirrors held a special magnetism. Instead of homework, I studied myself. Remembered synagogue as something forced to attend, prayers as soundtracks for the lives of other people. And after school, I walked home past the grass, the contrived squares busy stitching and joining into a lawn, passing themselves off like they'd been there all along. Yet I could still feel the weight of that sod, the wet itch of it on my skin, the wonder that wherever I set it, that patch would bind itself to the ground below. All day, my neighbors' sprinklers stuttered covenants of rainbows. All night, to the hiss of their groundwater whispers, I traced out my new hips and breasts, the possibilities I might grow into. And now, decades on, I am trying to grow a lawn on me, to zip myself into Judaism like a patchwork parka of grass, hoping it might take hold, might one day fit snug as a golf course greenway. Outside the lawn, inside me. Were both fake because I'd helped make them? If something is worked for, can it still be true? Thank you. You're welcome to clap between poems. You don't have to, so that's up to you. One of the things that I was really amazed by in reading the Bible for the first time and engaging with these texts and stories when I was older was how incredible the metaphors they gave me were, because it was all of these like very intense archetypes of different types of people. But I also there were all of these concepts that felt so big and complicated and abstract that I didn't really know how to write about them. And one of those was the idea of free will, right? So if you have this idea of like, okay, there's some omniscient, omnipotent being who maybe like there's fate and all these things, then like how do we go through the world actually believing that we can still make choices? And then one day I met a new friend who is an evolutionary biologist, at which I was like, okay, that's a good friend to have. And he was telling me about an experiment that he did when he was getting his doctorate, where they had a hypothesis that the reason that we have these magical things called thumbs, right? We are the only ones, yes, most of us, is because we actually evolved our hands to be better weapons, which I thought was pretty fascinating. And the way that they actually tested this out, this is a slight digression, because they wanted to figure out different ways of punching, but obviously you can really hurt your hand if you punch too hard. So they took cadaver arms and they rigged them up to pendulums and they put sensors in them, and then they would ram them into punching bags. And they found that a buttress fist, which is, we are the only mammal or animal that can do this, is only possible because of a thumb. And so the fact that this digit that allowed us to make buildings like this and to write things is also the thing that allows us to do damage to people. And I was like, oh, that is the perfect metaphor for free will. So you can see, sometimes like you just need to wait to find the image. Okay, free will. Free will is in our hands, in these bones lashed by ligaments sheathed in skin. Oh, sorry, we're on page 14. Okay. In these bones lashed by ligaments sheathed in skin. Flex your fingers wide like folding fans, collapse them in. Muscleless puppets, they are merciless or tender depending on what moves them. We can train a single finger to hold a body's weight, all 10 together to summon a sonata, birth a baby, ball into clubs, and beat a man to death. We tatters of lace and crafters of skyscrapers are the only animal who can make a fist. How much simpler if our bodies' weapons were separate, obvious as antlers. Yet the Talmud speaks of Yetzer Hara, our evil inclination, as the source of all creativity and desire. The same urge, a spur to make love or take someone without consent toward righteous anger or violent rage. Like the rabbis, some states define a deadly weapon only after the fact, by the damage a thing caused. Like break is both opportunity and fracture, as cleave holds fast while it also splits apart. Our hands, these striving hymns of contronyms. And you might have heard a reference to righteous anger, and I forget who I was talking with, but this idea of like, what's the difference between private and personal, and how do we share things that scare us? And for me, I came from a really angry household like that. It was like an angry family, and that totally took root in me. And so writing these poems was a way to kind of like work through like, what does it mean to be an angry person, and how much is like nature versus nurture, right? And how do you live with that? And the poem takes its title from a quote from something that Jacob said to Reuben, his firstborn son. And Reuben ended up, Samson was in the line of Reuben. And Jacob said, because you sped toward your anger like water speeds on its course, you shall no longer receive the abundance that was meant for you. Like water on its course. Every page, every day, 161. I'll get better at this game, sorry. Yeah, and I just, and I began to think too, right, and I think there's a lot more awareness of like, whether you think that God is like making you do stuff or you just have like an internal chemistry that you have to kind of push against. So this is kind of looking at that. Like water on its course. Every page, every day, a rigged game. Each human a character pricked by sentience, conscious of the joystick's jerk. Even before birth, Samson was blessed into service, his parents given holy notice. God's will conducted the command center in his head. There's a lion in the vineyard, Samson, tear it asunder. Here's the jawbone of an ass. There the faces of your enemies, and here's the arc of the swing. The more chosen you are, the less free you are to choose. And by chapter's end, betrayed, shorn, blinded, and dead by his own God-directed hands, but a murderer too. That fact just as true. Or is a sin compelled somehow less sinful? For if not to God, aren't we captive to our minds, wiring, our bodies, chemistry, the family we're born to? The anger that is my birthright, passed down from my father and his father unto him, corrosive, self-starting, it biles up in me. A surge of fury, I grow strong with it. My scalp singes and tightens, my muscles flex and sing. I try to soothe it with reason, to bury it in my chest, but it burns there like a second heart. The lion was the only kill Samson hid from his parents. Left to rot until bees hived the mighty ribs. When Samson plunged wrist deep into the remains, he emerged with palmfuls of honey, a false bomb that roiled his gut. For whether Samson was gripped by God or rage, the lion he killed was just as dead. Which part is God? My temper or my tempering of it? I need to believe it's both, that even the worst of me is somehow holy, that I can channel what I cannot change. Thank you. Yeah. So whoever was talking to me about like sharing things, like that poem was a scary one to write for a while. So the other thing that I found was, I don't know how many of you were originally or are English lit majors. Ooh, anyone? Yeah, maybe. Okay. So I feel like being an English lit major, maybe at least when I was coming up in school, kind of trained me to be like real picky and kind of have some judgment about stuff. Like, that book is bad, that person's a bad writer, like this is right. And all of a sudden, when you're reading a text that is designated sacred, you can't just be like, I don't really like that verse, that's not my thing, And instead, I had to sit with things that were like boring or even worse, very upsetting or offensive to me that I disagreed with. And it actually changed the way that I, one, experience reading, but also how I experience people. Because there's this kind of this sense that like, if you can sit with something or someone long enough, even the really, really hard things or people, they can kind of become your teacher, right? And for me, one of those stories that really taught me this was The Binding of Isaac, which I still am not okay with, like just for the record, I'm gonna say that. But I felt like there was a lot to be learned there. This is page 57. Because I feel like right now we are in a time where we are being asked to constantly take sides or make like definitive statements about things where like there are no sides. And every statement has to have like 50, but this, right? And so to me, it was something like, what if we can just be in uncertainty? So this starts with a quote from the British philosopher Eric Hoffer. Absolute faith corrupts as absolutely as absolute power. Why there is no Hebrew word for obey. What came later was the real trial. Because God knew Isaac would not die, while Abraham climbed the mountain believing he would. With conviction tempered in the fires of his faith, he walked up through the shaded valley, his son resolute ahead on the trail. Behind them, Sarah, Isaac's mother, Abraham's wife, a small darkness in the distance, growing forever smaller. He bound his beloved son, pulled back his legs, wrenched back his arms, knotted his ankles to his wrists, and laid him on that altar like a child falling through the sky. He held the knife knowing from every animal he'd ever sacrificed, how his son would jerk and shudder when the blade opened his throat. The familiar smoke of offered flesh. What came later, even with Isaac alive in the fields, inside Abraham was the knowledge of what he'd been willing to do. When they passed in the tent, Isaac rubbed a remembered ache in his shoulder and never again held his father's eye. Sarah, smelling the imagined ashes on her husband's fingers, the blood in the crease of his throat, turned from him in the night. And on every path, Abraham walked from that day forward, his son as he had been. A small back, barely the span of his hand, slung with the kindling meant for his burning. Seconds from the slaughter of the one meant to carry his line, of the son he'd wanted all his life, who's to say the voice in his head was God? Judaism is not a faith, but a tradition, and isn't doubt the crux of conscience? Yet what came later on a Sabbath morning, centuries on, was a congregation in Pittsburgh reading this story of Isaac's binding, of Abraham's terrible bind, when a man burning with unquestioning belief entered with a gun, and with no better angel to stay his hand, opened fire, believing the death of Jews would keep our country safe, believing this massacre, elderly congregants bleeding out on the floor, was God's work. Who would call such actions holy? And how many more times will each of us come down from the mountain, conviction knocking like a knife in our belt loop, stained with all we would have done? My daily gods are minor ones, of pride, of lust, of impatience and complacency. Yet how many have I harmed on the way to what I thought was right, or with hindsight, on the way to what I wanted? And how many sorry sacrifices have I made of myself? What if we turn from certainty and arm ourselves instead with questions? Obey, obey, obey is everywhere in translation. The real word is Shema. Listen. Thank you. The other story that kind of bothered me pretty badly was one that just kept coming up over and over and over again, because there were all of these women in the book of Genesis who all they wanted in the world was to have a baby, because they couldn't be full women in that time without being a mom. And they couldn't, and then all of a sudden, like, ta-da, like God would come down and like open their womb, and like everyone was happy. And it's true. Read your Bible; it's in there. And it was repeated over and over again. And as someone, especially at that time, who was really trying to make a choice about whether or not I wanted to have a child, and I had so many friends who desperately wanted to have children and couldn't, right? That felt really upsetting, right? That would be the only way that I could be like a full person. And so I felt like I needed to write about it. I forget who I was talking with about received forms. Hand? No. Yeah? Okay. I was like, I see someone. And But sometimes I think a received form, like a sonnet or villanelle, can be really helpful. But you want to pick a form that is going to help you do the thing that you want to do. And so for me, there's an ancient Arabic form called a ghazal, where it's like couplets, right, stanzas of 2 lines, and at the end of the second line is the same word. And it's just kind of repeated, right? Like the story is repeated over and over again. And then in a classic ghazal, at the very end, the poet is supposed to say their own name. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm really bad at following instructions, and I don't like being told what to do. So my ghazal, it's kind of nonce, and you're going to hear the word change throughout the whole poem. So yeah, oppositional defiance, it happens. So. The title comes from Isaiah. Sing, O barren one who did not bear a child. Her hand sharp in the small of Hagar's back, 41. Such a gift and a burden, who can say? And I should just say, this gives me an opportunity, and I'll start again, that Sarah, Abraham's wife, was first Sarai before she had a baby, and then became Sarah. But there's actually a thought that she had an even earlier name, and you'll hear that referenced here. And you'll also hear why I was excited about this form, because I got to say my name. So there you go. Sing, O barren one who did not bear a child. Her hand sharp in the small of Hagar's back, Sarai, that barren punster, pimped her handmaid to her husband, saying, as I am barren, please consort, bona in Hebrew, with her, by literally saying, I shall be built up, ibane, through her. A barren woman can still be clever, though rabbis leave this to imply a childless woman is a ruined structure in need of rebuilding. Barren, however, was not a rune forced on us, but a path my wife and I chose. A choice not so much against a child as for other things, our art, each other. A life barren only of all we'll never know. God said, I'll call you by a different name, and your destiny shall change. Sarai, barren, had no children, but Sarah did. Mom is a name I've cried times beyond counting, yet is a name I'll never be called. Less a name than a state of being, once born innate as DNA. Wife or writer, though, are titles non-familial, vocational, requiring daily upkeep, a renewal of, yes, I will still bear this, and be stronger for it? Who can say? Perhaps we'll end up most defined by what we are not. Yet bared by the roof of our ruined structure, we count the countless stars, grow our shared life in place of bearing a new one. Because before Sarah, and even before Sarai, was the first of the 3 names she'd eventually bear. Iska, whose root might be Sakta, saw, which would make her sight a prophet's, divinely inspired, or Sokin, a duller lot, meaning all gazed upon her beauty. Barren Iska, precursor to the name Jessica, like all women torn between being a seer and being the one seen. So prophet, tell me, is the only happy ending really a baby? Thank you. All right. Okay, just checking time. Okay, so this poem at least has a happy title, and then we just downhill from there. So, Mazel Tov, that's the title, page 39. So there you go. Don't tell me I never did anything for you. But all right, Mazel Tov. Circular breather. My dog can whine without ceasing, his tail thumping the wall beside the bed to call me up and out to the yard instead. In moonlight, the hydrangea's white blossoms are a zodiac of branch-bound constellations. Once God called Abraham out from his tent to the open field to count the uncountable lights in the sky, promising offspring bountiful as dust, numerous as the stars. Like Abraham, I too left my land, my birthplace, my father's house. But the closest I have to offspring is lifting his leg at the azalea, nose busy with the news the night air brings. Mazel tov, we say at births and other joyous occasions, the Jewish go-to for congratulations. Yet tov means good, and mazel, constellation or destiny. And sometimes, like Abraham, you must leave the place that grew you to grow toward better stars. In the house, my love is sleeping. Along the fence top, a procession of possums reminds that even in darkness, there are those who can see. Above, trees thick with summer frame a porthole of sky. Maybe, though, it's not always the stars that matter, but the space between them. The lines we draw to shape the absence, the lives we forge around what goes missing. So if I wish you mazel tov, know what I'll mean is, may you live beneath good stars and find a reason to open your door to the night. From the deck, the cool breeze makes a festival of the silver-lit leaves. Under my palm, the warmth of his fur, the rise of his ribs. He doesn't suspect his kidneys are failing, that his muzzle is white as the winter the vet has said he will not live to see. Like all of us, he is dying. Like most of us, he doesn't know it. His chin on my leg, he trusts me with the weight of his head. May the darkness be as much a blessing as the stars. Thank you. And I'm just going to read you one last poem. One of my favorite stories in Genesis is the story of Jacob beside the river. Are we familiar? Yeah? Okay. So Jacob, maybe not like the most upright dude all the time, yeah? So he, kind of did his brother wrong. And, decades later, he's going to see his brother for the first time. And he's terrified because his brother is like a big, strong dude. And quite frankly, he has reason to be angry. So Jacob sends on both of his wives, all his cattle, servants, all this stuff, sends them over across this river. He crosses, and he's beside this river at night. And all of a sudden, this stranger shows up, and they start wrestling. Yeah, it's like, all right, you're like, okay, Genesis, cool. And the Hebrew is actually very ambiguous. So it's very unclear, is Jacob wrestling an angel? Is Jacob actually wrestling with God, right? Because they wrestle until the sun starts to come up, and then Jacob says, you need to give me a new name, and that's the only way I'll let you go. And the name that Jacob is given is Israel. And that can be translated in a lot of ways, but one of the primary translations is Yisrael is one who wrestles with God, right? Or a God wrestler. And in more contemporary versions, kind of interpretations of this story, they're looking at this and they're like, this guy is in one of the darkest nights of his soul, right? And he's alone. And so the person he's actually wrestling with is himself. So, God wrestling, page 118. God wrestling. The river has tasted the salt of your skin, has lapped at your calves with its current. The river has swallowed the press of your steps. There is no record of your crossing. The river is between you and everything you call your life. So you step into a stranger's arms. Your shoulder fits theirs like a bone in its socket. Their jaw notches yours. All around you, a profusion of oleanders beams back the moonlight, offering a carpet of fallen petals. In your arms, all the promises you've yet to keep, all you've done that shames you. But what is wrestling if not an embrace? It's too dark to see you have the same face, and only like this, cheek to cheek, each looking over the other's shoulder, can you see the world whole. Close at first as a slow dance, you spin and spin, your tracks a tight coin. Matched, you step out, making a spear tip of your bodies. Matched, you step further, levered like rafters, needing the other to stay aloft. Your tracks trace widening circles, ringing out through the fallen blossoms. Names are required only when not alone. This stranger does not give you a new name, just dippers up the true one you tender in your chest. The day is breaking, the night's hold. The far bank is calling. On one side, you. On the other side, your life. Join them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. We're going to move furniture right now and then have some Q&A with Jessica. I'm going to, for the sake of our recording, repeat questions into the microphone. So who would like to begin our Q&A time? Okay, I have a question to start, and you all can think about it. So I love many, many things about this book, but one of the things that I love is that there is a robust note section in the back.
Yes.
And I feel like I always wrestle with this myself, like, is it okay to include so many notes?
Yeah.
How did you give yourself permission to just, like, give me the best notes section ever?
Thank you. I'm glad you also appreciate a good notes section. I think the question is really, how did I get my publisher to agree to include them?
Yes.
But yeah. So in Jewish tradition, it's really, really important that you always credit your sources. And so for me, not only was I, delving into the text itself, but I was learning from so many scholars and midrashis, and then also like rabbis that I was speaking with, and I didn't want people to think that I came up with all of this on my own, and so it felt vital. And also, I honestly, I wanted this to be a resource to people who wanted to delve deeper into the text that I was reading. So I didn't feel like I had a choice, even though it was already a very long poetry collection. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you want the... No, that's fine. Sorry, my brain was processing for a second.
Earlier in the afternoon, you were talking about how certain religious practices affected your writing of poetry, and I was curious how your writing of poetry at all affects your interpretation of sacred text, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like the inverse of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. Did everyone hear the question? Yeah. Okay. Great. So, I mean, I didn't really have a religious practice before I started writing these poems. And so I feel like poetry gave me that back and like gave me entrance to a world that I wouldn't have had otherwise. Kind of like I was saying with the ghazal form, I'm not very good at people telling me what to do. And so I think for me, to engage with religion, I needed to do it on my own terms. And I think that being able to be in conversation with the text and the tradition and even argue with it is a way that has allowed me to feel truly engaged and to have it matter to me. And then one of the most beautiful things is it took me 7 years to research and write this book because I was coming from kind of a place of zero knowledge. And during that time, I sought out Jewish poets to learn from, and I found that they were super hard to find. And that led me to actually found an organization called Yetzirah, which is for Jewish poets. And so poetry has not only like given me Judaism back, but then it's given me this incredible community of other writers. So to me, writing is kind of the best thing in the world. Like those are the best people I know. And also it's given me myself back, right? So, yeah.
What are your rules for breaking form rules? And how do you go about finding space on the page?
So the question is, what are your rules for playing with or breaking form rules? And how do you play with space on the page?
Okay. Oh, these are great questions. So first off, I feel like in order to break rules, you have to actually understand the rules. So I do force myself, I just don't publish them, like to actually adhere to the rules, because in a received form, when it makes you do certain things with repetition or rhyme, it's incredibly powerful because it's something that you wouldn't do on your own, right? Like, and it can force you into something in a good way, like a generative constraint, that you're going to be surprised by what you find. So I will try to do things in as strict a way as possible first, and then I allow myself, if I feel like the form is no longer in service of what I want to do, then I give myself permission to break it. But it has to be for a reason. In the same way that I have, like, to follow something, it has to be for a reason. To break it, it has to be for a reason. So that's kind of, but I think you actually, you know, like, for example, Sylvia Plath was someone who did a lot of very strict formal writing at first before she went to free verse. And you can actually feel that like a skeleton in her poems. And I think they're so much more powerful because of it. And then she lets herself kind of like just use that as a springboard into like super weird formal things that she's doing. And she talks about cutting the connective tissue, which I love so much. So it's like, so people have to actually make leaps with you. And in terms of space on the page, so my first book that I wrote when I was in graduate school is like, for me, not speaking for any students here, but were like scared student poems. Like they like clung to the left margin, you know, like to the side of a pool so they didn't drown. And they were very neat, like couplets or tercets or whatever. And then my second book, which is largely about like falling in love and like all this stuff, it felt like I needed to let the poems like stretch out because it was such a big subject. And that was very, very freeing. And so I think this book is kind of a marriage of both those things, where I really try, I feel like in a lot of ways, writing is 100% hard work. I do not believe, like, I don't just sit in a field and like poems come to me. Like, that sounds super nice, but yeah, not my experience. But I do think that like I do the work, I do the research, I do the craft work. But at a certain point, something is happening that is beyond me, and I have to let the poem be the shape it needs to be, and I am in service to that poem. And so some of these are prose poems, some of them are like neat little, you know, whatever. But I think it's great. I think like have a good time, and also for the love of God, your students right now, like I forget who I was talking to. My first year, I wrote a poem in my first year of my MFA that ended up being published on acetate, and they like stacked and layered up and they went all over, you know, so like I was just having fun. Like this is like, have fun. Writing is hard, so when you can have fun, have fun. That's how, yeah.
Earlier in the day, you mentioned how you don't fully understand a thing until you write it out.
Yes.
So how do you know, like, when a thing you need to write about it for yourself, and when a thing is like valuable or something that can go out into the world? Like, how do you know when a thing is for you and when a thing is for to be shared?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
So the
go ahead.
question is, how do you know when you're writing something that is just for you, or how do you know that you're writing something that is to be shared?
Well, I was talking with someone earlier about the difference between personal and private. And to me, quite often, the difference is literally just time. So private is like it just happened. And personal is like, it's 5 years later and you can like laugh about it a little bit. You know, it's not that like that intensity. I feel more and more like if there is something, I take notes all the time, right? Like I'm always taking notes on things. But if there is a question that does not have an easy answer, or something that is scary or shameful, that's probably the thing that somebody else also has. And so what I have found is the poems that enabled me to ask the most difficult questions and to look most closely at the hardest parts of who I am were the poems that were scariest to write, most painful to share, and are also the poems that people come to me and say, like, thank you. This is something like I didn't know how to say, right? And so to me, like, the reason I became a writer was because books gave me permission. And so, like, I want to be able to do that for other people. So just trust that if something really matters to you, there's somebody else who, like, also really needs to, like, hear what you have to say. So.
How has your writing process changed from when you first started writing poetry to where you are now?
So the question is, how has your writing process changed from when you first started writing until now?
I can tell you that every time I finish a book, I think, oh dear God, that will never happen again. Like I'm done, and you know that was fun, but the well is dry. I might slightly be in there, but I think I'm crawling out of the well right now. How has it changed? I am an obsessive person. I also like to work super hard. Here, I'm going to lean over here. That has never changed. So, like, I am a reviser. So quite often there are poems that will literally, like, I will work on for years and will go through 50, 60, 70 drafts. So that has not changed. I think trusting myself more. And also, one of the things that has changed my writing more than anything else is teaching writing. So if you have an opportunity to do that, whether it's like to little kids, to adults, like whatever, but like I've taught lessons. There's a great lesson that I like to teach I call Sonic Boot Camp, where we color code an M.A song and we actually watch the way sound moves through the entire song. That has totally changed the way that I write, right? So like if you can figure out how to explain something you do naturally and take it back in, that's going to transform things for you. So I would just say, like, I feel slightly more confident, but also I'm really willing to say, like, I have no idea. I am still a beginner at this, and I want to just, like, hang out with poets and poems that deeply inspire me and keep learning, and hopefully each book is going to be, you know, better and stronger and, like, more frightening in some way, in a positive way.
I'm team epigraph, by the way, so that's amazing.
All right.
Can you talk a little bit about epigraphs and why the poems in this collection have them?
Yeah.
So the question in a nutshell, why epigraphs? How did you use them?
And that Robbie is team epigraph.
And Yes, as am I. And yes, how did you become Team Epigraph?
How did I become Team Epigraph? With this book, I was trying to thread a somewhat impossible needle. I happened to meet right before the pandemic a rabbi who taught Midrash for 40 years and was like one of the foremost scholars of Midrash. And we ended up studying together for several years. And I wanted to write poems that he would find interesting about a text that he had been teaching for 40 years. And then I had friends who had never read the Bible, and I wanted them to be able to enjoy these poems and not feel shut out of them. And so for me, epigraphs were the perfect way if you made them as small as possible. I think like when you have an epigraph and it's like 2 pages long, I'm like, no, like that's just plagiarism. But I think epigraphs can be exposition, right? So it's text I don't have to put into my poem, but it's giving someone just enough of what they need to find something accessible. And that feels really important. And then also like, it's almost sometimes like putting a flag on something and being like, hey, pay attention, this is a thing that, and then it leads you into the poem. So, but I'm glad we can bond. We should have t-shirts that say Team Epigraph. And Team Endnotes. That can be on the back.
Yes, both, please. Bettina.
So first of all, I love the fact that you wrote the poem Wrestling with Abraham and Isaac.
Yeah.
My question is, when you read a story, one of the stories in the biblical texts, and your honest response to it is fury,
Yes.
or God, how could you cast that?
Yeah.
Did you feel the fury sort of driving you through the writing of the poem? Did you feel it dissipating? What was the emotional journey like with your fury, or with whatever word you would use to describe the feeling you had about that story?
Yeah.
That obviously motivated you to write the poem.
So I love that question. If a biblical story makes you furious, what is the process of writing the poem? Do you use the fury? Do you dissipate the fury? Do you keep the fury forever?
Yeah. Well, per the Samson poem, like also like fury and anger is something I've thought a lot about. And there's another poem in here where I kind of came to the realization at the end. I think the line is, such anger is just sorrow with armor on. And I feel like so much of the rage that we see today is people who are scared or ashamed. Yeah, and so it's a lot, but that's a closed down feeling, or they feel powerless, and anger feels like powerful and activating. And so I feel like a lot of the rage is kind of like a scared little kid, like yelling. And so sometimes for me, when I feel anger at something, it's kind of just like a little flare that says, you need to pay attention to this. And this story was like that, and I especially got angry because so many of the rabbinic commentators throughout time made excuses for Abraham and tried to justify it. And I was just like, no, I'm sorry, like this is not okay. But I had to understand with that story, with so many stories, why is this a book on which is like the cornerstone of Western civilization? There has to be something there. And so that was the thing. It was like this I tried to let curiosity outweigh anger, disgust, despair, all of those things, and let there be some uplift. Because I was like, okay, this is awful. Things like this actually happen. What can we learn from them? And that's kind of just like how I'm trying now to move through the world. And I'm really grateful. Like that, I think you were asking me the question of like, how did poetry change things? Like, I think reading the text has literally changed like how I relate to things, is because I try to see underneath and be less reactive and kind of see like, okay, what are the deeper feelings or questions that are there? So. Yeah.
Primarily, this book is based on your self-study, which is amazing, of the biblical text and the midrash and everything.
Yeah. That was the question?
So, but were you connected at all to a Jewish congregation, or, well, I guess you talked about it.
Oh,
Do you wanna repeat the
I'll
question?
answer. Yeah. So the question was this book kind of born of self-study, or was I connected to a Jewish congregation? I did meet that rabbi, so that was helpful in terms of permission giving. But we just met as Hevruta, which is like traditional Jewish partner study, and we actually would talk about poetry because he loved poetry. Yeah, I actually think I needed to discover this on my own. So I taught myself like enough biblical Hebrew to be able to like read the text a little bit in the original, deal with the etymology. I had 3 different translations, and then I had a set of scholars that I read for every single portion. And that's why it took 7 years. So, oh, thank you. Thank you. And but I think like, and I talked with some students earlier about research and why I think research is really powerful. And I think sometimes we can get caught in our own heads. But I think when you have a subject outside of you, it actually can help you write beyond what you could write on your own. Like, these are not poems I could have written by myself. Like, these poems were called out of me by engagement with this text and by centuries of thinkers who thought so deeply about it. So,
Final question, I think, for time. Robbie?
Team Epigraph. Sorry,
Yes.
go ahead.
I mean, 7 years on one project. We have a lot of second-year students working on thesis projects, and so I was curious if you could talk a little bit about how you maintain positivity in this project, and then how you like get yourself to the finish line.
So the question is about, especially for our master's students, how do you sustain momentum and positivity in a long project?
Okay, I will say my first book I researched for 7 months, so a little bit better. That was my thesis as a graduate student. I think, to me, and I was talking about this with someone earlier. I think that if I had been like, I have a message and this is something I want to say, that would have sustained me for like a day. Like, that, there would have been nothing in that. For me, this was like, this whole world had opened up of the most existential questions possible, right? Like, how do I live a good life? What is a good life? I'm gonna die. We're all gonna die. How do I still like maintain hope in the face of that? You know what I mean? Like, just light questions like that. I was super fun at parties, but these were things that were like, they felt like, what could be better than to devote myself to this? And then one of the most amazing things about this in terms of sustaining was it allowed me to enter into conversation with people who also were asking these questions and cared deeply. And so, if I don't really like to give too much advice, but I would just say, find people that are having the conversations that you want to be having. Right? Those are the people who will sustain you. They're also the people where you're like, oh my God, it's been X number of years and I haven't finished my book and whatever, who are going to be like, yes, but it matters. Like, let's go. And you get to do that for each other. So if you have people around you, even just one person, like, hold on to them. Hold on to them. I have writing partners that I have been exchanging work with for 10 years. And those people like absolutely sustain me. One of them called me the other day and said, it's very nice that you're doing other work. I would like to read more of your poems. And I sat down and started writing. And like, sometimes you need a little bit of external. So questions, good friends, and the conversations you want to be having.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Please wildly thank Jessica for being here. she is willing to sign some books and talk and stick around for a little bit.
Only $5 a signature.
And Amy is willing to sell you a book if you don't have one or if you want to buy one for someone else. So please make use of that time and book selling. And thank you all for being here tonight.